candles were already lit when I noticed. Long marble table, gold-rimmed plates, 42 guests, 41 place cards. Mine was missing. A violinist was playing softly near the terrace doors. The air smelled like citrus and expensive wine. My sister-in-law stood at the head of the table in a silk dress, glowing under the hanging lights. I scanned the seating chart again. Nothing. My husband leaned toward me and chuckled. Oops, guess we miscounted. Laughter rippled down the table. Glasses clinked. No one stood up. No one shifted to make space. I felt every eye on me. And in that silence, I understood something. I had never actually been seated at this table. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary. The marble floor felt cool through the thin soles of my heels. A waiter hovered beside me, unsure where to place the extra napkin he was holding. My sister-in-law tilted her head. "We can pull a chair from the patio," she said lightly. "It'll be cozy." Cozy. There were empty decorative chairs along the wall. None had place settings. My husband didn't look embarrassed. He looked entertained. "It's just a seating thing," he murmured, squeezing my arm as if I were overreacting before I had even reacted. Around the table, cousins smiled politely. One uncle avoided eye contact entirely. A business associate adjusted his cufflinks, pretending not to notice. No one said, "This isn't right." The birthday banner behind her read Buon Compleanno in gold letters. I had chosen that font. I had approved the floral arrangements. I had confirmed the violinist's playlist that morning. 3 weeks of coordination as I handled the venue contract because my husband was too busy. I wired the deposit from our joint account. I spent afternoons comparing menus while he forwarded me emails with one-word responses. "Looks good." "Sure." "Your call." Have you ever organized something beautiful only to realize you weren't meant to attend it? I remembered the planning call with the venue manager. She had insisted on final guest count confirmations 72 hours in advance. 42. I gave her that number personally. At the table, my sister-in-law raised her glass. "Let's not delay dinner over logistics," she said. "We're all family here." Family. The word felt carefully placed. My husband laughed again. "You're being dramatic," he whispered to me under his breath. "Just sit somewhere. Somewhere. As there is a difference between being unseated and being misplaced. One is an accident. The other is a message." I looked down at the printed seating chart near the entrance. My name wasn't scribbled out. It simply wasn't there. That's when I felt it. Not anger. Recognition. Like anyone who's ever been tolerated instead of included, I replayed small moments in my head. The time she introduced me as Daniel's wife, without using my name. The Christmas photo where I stood at the edge, while she positioned her brother in the center. The inside jokes told in Italian, even though they all spoke English fluently. I had laughed along. I had adjusted. I had told myself it wasn't personal. Was it easier to believe that? The waiter cleared his throat softly. "Signora?" He needed direction. So did I. I turned to my husband. "Seems I'm not family," I said calmly. He rolled his eyes. "Don't start." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I simply stepped back from the table. No one stopped me. The violin continued playing. Forks scraped porcelain. Someone asked for more wine. I walked past the terrace doors, down the stone steps, into the courtyard where fairy lights hung above trimmed hedges. The night air felt cooler than it had inside. 33 minutes. That's how long it took. But they didn't know that yet. Because while they were laughing at a missing chair, the event itself was still under my authorization. And authorization can be withdrawn. I didn't storm out. I walked. Slow steps down the stone path, past the fountain that had been running all evening. The water made a soft, steady sound, almost peaceful. Inside, a cutlery clinked against porcelain. A toast began. Applause followed. I checked my phone. 3 unread emails from the venue manager, 1 from the catering coordinator, confirming final payment clearance. Everything was under my name. Every contract, every deposit, every signature. My husband had insisted it was simpler that way. My credit was cleaner. My documentation easier for international processing. At the time, it felt practical. Have you ever noticed how practicality can become leverage? I remembered small comments over the past year. "You're lucky you married into this family," my sister-in-law once joked during a brunch in Milan. Everyone laughed. Lucky. Another time, my husband told a friend, "She handles the boring logistics. I handle the vision." The boring logistics. I used to think that meant trust, and now I wondered if it meant invisibility. Standing in the courtyard, I replayed earlier conversations from that afternoon. When we arrived, she had hugged everyone else first. I waited half a second too long before she turned to me. "Oh," she'd said, "you made it." As if my attendance had been optional. Even the seating discussion earlier that day had felt rushed. She had said, "We finalized everything," without showing me the chart. I didn't push. Why didn't I push? Because I didn't want to seem insecure. Because I told myself I was overthinking. Like anyone who's ever ignored a subtle shift, I convinced myself harmony mattered more than precision. Inside the venue, the second course was being served. I could see silhouettes moving past the tall windows. My husband was standing now, gesturing animatedly, probably telling a story. I opened the catering agreement on my phone. Clause 9. Event authorization subject to primary contract holder. Primary contract holder. Me. My thumb hovered over the contact name of the venue manager. This wasn't impulsive. It was clarity. If I wasn't seated at the table, why was I carrying the responsibility for it? I typed a short message. "Please pause service. Authorization withdrawn. I will explain shortly." I didn't add emotion. Just instruction. 33 minutes earlier, they had laughed. Now I waited. A minute passed. Then 2. Inside, movement slowed. I saw the headwaiter step toward my husband. There was confusion in his posture. My phone buzzed. "Are you certain?" the manager replied. "Yes," I typed back. Have you ever reached a point where silence feels heavier than confrontation? The music stopped first. Then the waitstaff began quietly collecting plates that had barely been touched. From where I stood, I could see my sister-in-law's expression shift from amusement to irritation. My husband stepped away from the table and scanned the courtyard. He saw me. His walk toward me was faster now, not playful. "What did you do?" he asked under his breath. I looked at him steadily. "I corrected the miscount," I said. He stared at me, trying to understand whether I was joking. I wasn't. Because sometimes the smallest omission reveals the entire structure of a relationship, and I was beginning to see ours clearly. His face shifted from confusion to calculation. "Tell me you're not serious," he said quietly. Inside the venue, chairs were scraping. Guests were standing. A few voices rose, not in anger yet, but in uncertainty. The head waiter approached us, careful and diplomatic. "Signora, "We have received a message regarding authorization." My husband stepped in front of me slightly. There must be a mistake. The waiter looked at me, not him. "There is no mistake," I said. The silence between us stretched. My sister-in-law appeared at the doorway. The glow from inside framed her like a stage light. "What's happening?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected. "Apparently," my husband said, jaw tight, "there's been an overreaction." Overreaction. That word again. I thought about the missing chair, the laughter, the way no one moved. Was that small? Or was it cumulative? Have you ever realized that the little things were never little at all? She walked closer, heels clicking sharply against the stone. "You canceled my birthday dinner?" she asked. "No," I replied calmly. "I canceled the event under my name." There is a difference. Around us, guests were checking their phones. One of the cousins muttered something about payment confusion. The caterer's assistant stood frozen near the doorway, waiting for direction. My husband lowered his voice. "You're embarrassing us. Embarrassing us." I studied his face. Months ago, when I'd asked to be included in business discussions, he'd said, "It's complicated. Don't make it about you." When I offered suggestions for the firm's holiday gala, he'd said, "It's not your lane." When his sister joked about me being support staff, he'd laughed. And patterns don't shout. They repeat. Tonight wasn't about a chair. It was about being positioned outside the circle, then told to smile. I looked at my sister-in-law. "You said we're all family," I said softly. "I just wanted the seating to reflect that." Her lips pressed together. "This is childish," she replied. Childish, as if acknowledging exclusion was immature. The venue manager stepped outside now, holding a tablet. "We need clarification," she said carefully. "If authorization remains withdrawn, service will conclude." 33 minutes had passed. Guests were already whispering. My husband exhaled sharply. "Fix this." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I simply asked one question. When was my seat removed? Neither of them answered, because that was the real issue. It hadn't been forgotten, how it had been decided, and I was done pretending it was accidental. The courtyard lights flickered gently in the evening breeze. For the first time all night, I felt steady. No one answered my question. Instead, my husband looked past me toward the guests, calculating the optics. His sister crossed her arms, chin lifted slightly, as if she were the one being inconvenienced. "It was a mistake," she said finally. "The planner rearranged things last minute." I held her gaze. "I was the planner," I replied. Silence again. Have you ever noticed how quickly confidence disappears when facts enter the room? Inside, a few guests were already leaving. Not dramatically, just quietly. A couple from Florence slipped out with polite nods. One of my husband's business contacts checked his watch and whispered something about an early flight. Embarrassment travels faster than explanations. The caterers began clearing the main table entirely, plates half full, wine glasses barely touched. The violinist stood awkwardly near the terrace door, bow hanging at his side. My husband turned back to me. "You've made your point," he said through his teeth. "Now reverse it." Reverse it, like it was a software glitch. I felt something inside me settle. For years I had adjusted, smoothed edges, translated tones, explained jokes that landed wrong, hosted holidays, sent thank you notes, remembered birthdays. I made myself smaller in rooms where I was already peripheral. Why? Because I believed inclusion required effort. Because I thought love meant flexibility. Standing in that courtyard, I realized something harder. Flexibility without respect is just self-erasure, and I looked at him carefully. Really looked. When did the jokes stop feeling like jokes? When did his laughter at my expense become normal? Like anyone who has slowly shifted roles in a relationship, I hadn't noticed the line when I crossed from partner to accessory. "You're overreacting," he repeated, softer now. Maybe I was, or maybe I was responding proportionally for the first time. "I won't reverse it," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. His sister let out a short, incredulous breath. "This is unbelievable." No. What was unbelievable was thinking someone would fund their own exclusion indefinitely. The venue manager waited patiently for final confirmation. I nodded once. "Conclude the event." She tapped her screen. That was it. No shouting, no scene, just service ending. Lights dimming slightly, as guests dispersing. The courtyard felt larger now, quieter. And for the first time that evening, I wasn't the one standing without a place. I was the one who chose to leave the table. The fallout didn't explode. It spread. Messages began arriving before we even left the courtyard. One cousin asked what had really happened. A business associate texted my husband directly. "Unfortunate misunderstanding tonight." Misunderstanding. He walked beside me toward the car, phone pressed to his ear, already shaping the narrative. "There was a booking error," he said. "Nothing major." Nothing major. I unlocked the car quietly and sat inside without turning the engine on. He ended the call and looked at me. "You humiliated my family." My family. The phrasing was careful. When did I stop being part of it? I asked. And he didn't answer that either. Instead, he shifted tactics. "You're emotional," he said. "This is grief from last year's stress. You're projecting." Projecting. It's interesting how quickly someone reframes your clarity as instability. Have you ever noticed that? I folded my hands in my lap. "The event was under my name," I said evenly. "If I'm not family enough to have a seat, I'm not responsible enough to fund it." He stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language. This wasn't about revenge. It was about alignment. Actions matching reality. Inside the venue, I saw through the glass that most guests had already left. Staff were clearing centerpieces. My sister-in-law stood near the entrance, speaking rapidly to someone on the phone. Her expression wasn't anger anymore. It was damage control. For the first time. And I wasn't trying to fix it for them. And that shift felt permanent. We didn't talk on the drive back to the hotel. Rome moved past the windows in quiet gold reflections. Scooters hummed by. Streetlights flickered across the windshield. He kept both hands on the steering wheel, jaw tight, phone face down in the cup holder. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask why I felt the way I did. He focused on logistics. "We'll need to issue refunds," he muttered. "This could affect business relationships." Business relationships. Not our relationship. Have you ever noticed how quickly priorities reveal themselves when comfort is disrupted? When we reached the hotel, he stepped out first. I stayed seated for a moment longer, watching my own reflection in the glass. I didn't look angry. I looked clear. Upstairs, I packed slowly, and not dramatically, just methodically. My toiletries into a small pouch, my passport back into my handbag, the receipts from the venue folded into an envelope. He stood by the window, arms crossed. "You're really going to make this bigger than it needs to be?" he asked. "Bigger." as if I hadn't been the one made smaller all evening. "I'm going to make it accurate," I replied. "There's a difference." I booked a separate flight home for the next morning, not to punish him, not to create a scene, to create space. Space clarifies what noise hides. He watched me move around the room like he was seeing me differently, maybe for the first time without the buffer of family dynamics. "Are you leaving me?" he asked quietly. It wasn't dramatic. It was almost practical. "I'm stepping back," I said. "From what?" he didn't ask. Because he already knew. This wasn't about a chair. It was about value. And for the first time, I wasn't negotiating mine. I flew home alone the next morning. No announcement. No long message explaining my side. Just a quiet seat by the window and 3 hours of uninterrupted thought. When I landed, my phone was full of notifications. Her birthday dinner had already become a story. Not the version my husband tried to tell. Not the booking error. Guests had posted photos of half-served plates. Someone joked online about the shortest luxury dinner in Rome. Another tagged the venue asking what happened. Reputation doesn't collapse loudly. It tilts. Over the next week, a few of my husband's business contacts reached out to me directly. Polite, curious. "We just wanted to clarify billing," one email said, because the contracts were in my name. Transparency matters when money is involved. I responded calmly, forwarded documentation, confirmed refunds had been processed. No blame, just facts. At home, the silence felt different from before. Not heavy, clean. He called twice, left one message. "We need to talk, not about Rome, about us." For the first time, I didn't rush to repair it. Have you ever realized that stepping back reveals who actually steps forward? His sister posted a vague quote about loyalty and misunderstandings. Comments filled with sympathy from friends who hadn't been there. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because anyone who witnessed that courtyard understood what really happened. A missing seat. A quiet correction. An imbalance exposed. I began redirecting my energy elsewhere, to work projects I had postponed. A small consulting idea I'd shelved because it wasn't aligned with his family's brand. Aligned. I smiled at that word now. This was just the beginning of my quiet strength. If this resonates, take a moment to like the video. Share your thoughts below. Sometimes the smallest moments reveal the biggest truths. He eventually came home. We talked, calmly, without the audience. What happens next is still unfolding. But one thing is clear. I will never again sit at a table where my place is optional. I used to think exclusion had to be loud to be real. That if someone truly didn't value you, they would say it clearly. They rarely do. Most of the time, it shows up in smaller ways. In the missing chair. In the joke that lands a little too cleanly. In the way everyone laughs. And no one looks at you. And the truth is, disrespect doesn't begin with cruelty. It begins with permission. The first time you ignore it. The first time you say, it's not a big deal. The first time you decide keeping the peace matters more than keeping your dignity. I did that. Over and over. Until one evening in Rome, when I realized something simple. If I wasn't seated at the table, I didn't have to fund the table. That wasn't revenge. It was alignment. Your energy should match your treatment. Your effort should match your inclusion. Your loyalty should match your respect. And if it doesn't, you're allowed to adjust. You're allowed to step back. You're allowed to withdraw access. Quietly. There's a power in calm decisions that people don't talk about. Not dramatic exits, not public speeches, just small, precise corrections, of the kind that don't require applause. Because here's what I learned. When you stop overcompensating, people reveal how much they were relying on you. When you stop smoothing things over, the imbalance becomes visible. When you stop begging for a seat, they realize you were holding the room together. It took one missing chair for me to see the pattern. It took one canceled dinner for them to understand the value of the person they laughed at. And here's the part no one warns you about. Peace feels unfamiliar at first. You'll want to fix it. You'll want to explain yourself. You'll want to soften the edges. Don't. Clarity doesn't need decoration. You don't need to humiliate anyone to reclaim your space. You just need to stop participating in your own exclusion. If someone treats you like an extra guest in your own life, pause. Look around. Ask yourself quietly, who signed the contract here? Because sometimes you are the authorization, and you can withdraw it, not out of anger, out of alignment. That night in Rome wasn't the end of something. It was the first time I chose myself without apology. And once you do that, you never really go back. So tell me, if your seat was missing, would you pull up a chair? Or would you walk away? Comment below.